richest men in the known world are locked in a room, staring at a document that will guarantee their families remain wealthy forever. All they have to do is vote yes. If they sign this, they pull up the ladder. They ensure that no new blood, no ambitious young entrepreneur, and no common worker can ever rise to their level again. They're about to vote to kill the American dream. The tension is suffocating. They know that by protecting their own assets, they are signing the death warrant of their nation. But greed. Greed is a powerful drug. The head of the council stands up. He looks at the document. He looks at his peers. And then, he casts the vote that seals the fate of a superpower. You think I'm talking about Washington, D.C. in 2024? Or maybe Wall Street in 2008? No. That was Venice in the year 1297. And the cycle they started that day? The United States just hit the exact same milestone. Why would a superpower commit self-sabotage? It starts with a desperate gamble. We call this Stage 1, the revolutionary break. But to the men living it, it felt like a death sentence. In 1568, the Dutch weren't a powerhouse. They were a terrified group of rebels hiding in a swamp, hunted by the Spanish Empire, the most terrifying military machine on earth. Spain had the gold, the ships, and the executioners. The Dutch had nothing but the rising tide and a refusal to kneel. They didn't build a nation, they built an escape hatch, a zone where money and faith were safe from the emperor's grasp. Fast forward 200 years, different continent, same script. 13 colonies of farmers and smugglers looked at the British Empire, the new master of the world, and decided to bite the hand that fed them. Washington didn't just fight a war, he led a hostile takeover. This is the DNA of the commercial republic. It isn't born from ancient bloodlines or divine right. It is born as a startup, a violent, scrappy disruption designed to steal the future from the old, lazy giants. The USA ticked this box the moment the ink dried on the Declaration of Independence. They opened their doors to every hustler, outcast, and genius the old world rejected, fueling an engine of pure, raw ambition. But there is a dark side to starving in the cold. When you start with nothing, you become obsessed with making something. You become the best. You become the factory. But that hunger, that terrifying drive to build, it doesn't last forever. And when it fades, the rot begins. The rot is invisible at first because it hides behind the roar of engines. Before a nation dies, it becomes a monster of production. This is Stage 2. Venice didn't just build ships, they operated the arsenal, a terrifying industrial machine that could vomit out a fully armed war galley in a single day. The Dutch took this obsession further, designing wind-powered sawmills that devoured Scandinavian forests to build the merchant fleet that ruled the oceans. America seized this mantle with lethal efficiency. Between 1870 and 1970, the United States didn't just join the global market, it strangled it. We became the workshop of the world, turning the entire continent into a smokestack that forged steel cheaper, faster, and harder than the dying empires of Europe could comprehend. We ticked this box by drowning the world in Ford Model Ts and Liberty ships, forcing every rival power to buy from us or perish. It feels like invincibility. It feels like destiny. But this total dominance creates a dangerous byproduct. When you sell everything to everyone, the gold flows in one direction, straight into your vaults. You become flooded with capital. The banks swell, the coffers overflow, and suddenly the elites realize they have a problem. They have generated more cash than they can possibly spend on new factories. The beast is full, but it is still hungry. And that stagnant mountain of wealth is about to demand a new, darker playground. That playground is global domination when you sit on a mountain of gold. You stop caring about the steel mills and the shipyards that built it. You realize the currency itself is the ultimate export. This is the third deadly milestone: hegemony. Venice did it when the ducat became the only coin accepted from Alexandria to London. The The Dutch did it when the guilder became the reserve currency of Europe. The United States slammed this trap shut at Bretton Woods, forcing the entire planet to transact in greenbacks. We made the dollar the only oxygen the global economy was allowed to breathe. If you wanted to buy oil, weapons, or grain, you had to come to us on your knees. It looks like godhood. You can print value out of thin air while other nations sweat for it. But this absolute power demands a blood sacrifice. To keep your paper king, you must guarantee the safety of every shipping lane, pipeline, and border on Earth. You become the world policeman, parking aircraft carriers in oceans you have no business patrolling just to ensure the spice keeps flowing. You feel invincible, but you are actually overextended, exhausted, and drunk on your own supply. And at this dizzying height, the masters of the universe face a terrifying crossroads. The factories are getting older, labor is getting expensive. In 1980, the American elite stood at this precipice. They had to decide whether to reinvest in the hard work of production or take the easy route of financial speculation. They looked at the fatal mistake the Dutch made 3 centuries prior, and they didn't just repeat it. They sprinted toward it. If you want to see more forbidden history that the algorithm usually hides, hit the like button. It helps the signal break through the noise. They chose the poison. Remember that vote in the darkroom, the one that sealed the fate of the superpower? It wasn't a declaration of war against a foreign enemy. It was a declaration of war against their own future. The Dutch called it the periwig period. The merchant kings, once calloused from hauling ropes, put on powdered wigs and soft velvet. They looked at their shipyards, dirty, loud, and difficult to manage, and sneered. Why build ships when you can simply lend money? They became so addicted to the easy returns of interest that they committed the ultimate treason. They started lending gold to Britain, financing the very navy that would eventually burn their fleet to the waterline. In the 1980s, the United States didn't just walk into this same trap, that we built a high-speed rail directly into its jaws. We initiated Stage 4, the financial pivot. The boardroom titans looked at the Rust Belt, at the unions, at the grime of production, and decided it was beneath them. They realized they could strip the copper out of the walls, fire the workforce, and ship the machinery to China for pennies on the dollar. They stopped creating value and started extracting it. This was the suicide pact. It was the moment Wall Street stopped serving Main Street and started cannibalizing it. The link between the elite and the nation was severed. For the first time in history, the stock market could soar while the country crumbled. The rich could now get richer because the average worker was dying, not in spite of it. The yes vote was a silent agreement to turn the economy into a harvesting machine, where the citizens were no longer the builders, but the crop. They secured their fortunes, yes. But in doing so, they created a phantom economy, a towering skyscraper built on a sinkhole. And as the champagne corks popped in the penthouses, nobody noticed that the ground floor had already collapsed into the basement. This is the phase where the patient feels euphoric right before the organ failure sets in. We are now deep inside the gilded rot. On the surface, the empire has never looked better. The stock tickers are flashing emerald green, breaking records every single morning. The champagne isn't just flowing, it's drowning out the sound of the cracking support beams. The elites are drunk on a dangerous illusion, the belief that the price of their assets reflects the health of their nation. It happened in Amsterdam first. In the twilight of their empire, the Dutch regents paraded through the streets in powdered French wigs and silk, averting their gaze from the beggars starving in the canals just feet away. Venice followed the same script, throwing masquerade balls that lasted for months, dancing frantically in their palaces while the arsenal, the shipyard that once ruled the Mediterranean, sat silent, gathering rust and spiderwebs. America has now perfected this split-screen nightmare. We have entered the era of the K-shaped fracture. The elevator to the penthouse is moving at light speed, decoupling completely from the ground floor where the foundation is turning to sand. The investor class has successfully insulated themselves from the reality of the country they inhabit. They believe the soaring numbers on their screens are a shield. They mistake inflation for growth and leverage for strength. The disconnect is total. The brain has severed its connection to the body, leaving the limbs to wither while the head hallucinates visions of infinite prosperity. They look at their portfolios and see invincibility, but they are making the fatal error of the survivor. They feel richer than ever, convinced their fortress is impenetrable. They don't realize that the termites have been eating for 40 years, and the walls guarding their mansion have already turned to dust. When the foundation turns to dust, the structure above it doesn't just fall, it freezes. This is the rigor mortis of an empire. We call it gridlock, but the Dutch knew it as the Patriot Revolt. In the 1780s, the Dutch Republic didn't just have arguments, they had a nervous breakdown. The merchant oligarchs and the monarchists stopped trying to govern and started trying to destroy each other. They were so busy fighting over who got to steer the ship that nobody noticed the engine had died. Politics stopped being about the survival of the nation and mutated into a vicious cage match to protect private hoards of gold. We are living that same paralysis today. We look at Washington and see a battlefield, but it is actually a crime scene where the weapon is in action. The swamp isn't a drained wetland, it is quicksand. Every decision, every bill, every desperate attempt to fix the rotting bridges or the failing power grid gets swallowed by a polarization so deep it acts like a straitjacket. The most terrifying part isn't the shouting politicians, it's the silence in the shipyards. We have trillions of dollars in military budgets, yet we can't build a frigate in under 5 years. We have the most expensive defense force in human history, but the industrial lungs required to breathe life into it, the ammo plants, the steel foundries, the dry docks, have been sold for scrap. We are a knight standing in gleaming diamond-encrusted armor, unable to lift his sword arm because the muscle beneath has atrophied. The country is paralyzed. It can't move. It can't adapt. It is a sitting duck, and that is when the shark smells blood. The shark doesn't warn you. It strikes when the water is calmest. This is the moment the facade strips away, revealing the terrified corpse inside the machine. We have arrived at the terminal phase. In 1781, the Dutch Republic finally had to answer the door. The British Empire, tired of the games, declared war. The Dutch public wasn't worried. They looked at their ledgers, their piles of gold, and their glorious history of ruling the waves. They assumed their fleet was ready. They were wrong. When the order came to sail, the ships didn't move. They sat heavy in the water, sluggish and clumsy. The hulls weren't just old. They were waterlogged, rotting from the inside out because the Admiralty had spent decades skimming maintenance budgets to pad their own pockets. The officers on the bridge weren't hardened sailors who had fought the sea. They were the soft, pampered sons of the banking elite, appointed by their fathers to play dress-up in uniform. The British Navy didn't just defeat them, they humiliated them. The Dutch fleet was crushed not by superior tactics, but by the brutal reality that you cannot fight a war with a ledger. The empire that once defied kings collapsed because it had forgotten that gold cannot stop a cannonball. Venice chose a quieter, more shameful death. When Napoleon's troops appeared on the horizon, the Serene Republic didn't even bother to load the muskets. They had the money to hire an army. They had the fortifications to withstand a siege, but they had lost the stomach for the fight. The oligarchy was so terrified of losing their assets that they surrendered 1,000 years of sovereignty without firing a single shot. They handed the keys of their city to a tyrant just to ensure the party could continue for one more night. This is the nightmare that keeps the Pentagon awake. We look at the Pacific. We look at the Red Sea. The flashpoints are igniting. On paper, the United States is the titan of the earth. We have the most expensive aircraft carriers ever built. We have satellites that can read a license plate from space, but beneath the high-tech skin, are we the Dutch? We assume the button will work. We assume the shipyard can replace the losses. But what if the corruption of the financial pivot has eaten the wiring? What if the paralysis has rusted the gears so badly that when the command is given, the machine simply groans? We are standing on the deck of the most magnificent ship in history, screaming challenges at the gathering storm, blissfully unaware that the termites have already eaten the rudder. The shock isn't coming. It is already here. And now, the only question left is whether we have the courage to jump overboard before the hull snaps in two. Most people will just sink with the ship. Don't be one of them. Please subscribe to this channel and let's figure out how to build a life raft together. We track the collapse here in real time. Is the shipwreck guaranteed? Is the script already written in stone? Or is there a blank page left at the end of the book? Most historians will tell you that once the gears of the cycle start grinding, they cannot be stopped. They will tell you that the momentum of greed is too heavy, that the gravity of the debt is too strong. They will point to the ruins of the arsenal in Venice and the sunken hulls of the Dutch fleet and tell you that destiny is a slaughterhouse. But there is a variable they forgot: choice. We do not have to follow the specter of the Dutch Republic into the abyss. We can grab the wheel. But the cost of changing course is terrifying. To survive, we have to commit an act of voluntary amputation. Now, we have to look at the financial economy, that towering, glittering guillotine we built in the 80s, and dismantle it brick by brick. We have to break the suicide pact. It requires a brutal return to the dirt and the noise. We must abandon the soft, easy addiction of lending money and force ourselves back into the hard, callous discipline of the workshop. We have to remember how to forge steel, how to rivet hulls, and how to value sweat over speculation. The elites in that dark room will never vote for this. They will cling to their paper fortunes until the water fills their lungs, because fixing the nation means destroying their wealth. So the correction won't come from the boardroom. It will come from the shock. The pain is not the end of the story. It is the medicine. The collapse of the mirage isn't death. It is the fever breaking. It is the only way to flush the toxin out of the system so the body can learn to walk again. The cycle is relentless, but it is not a death sentence. It is a test. A test that asks if we are willing to sacrifice the illusion of today to secure the reality of tomorrow. History is a wheel, but it doesn't have to be a steamroller. We know what comes next. The question is, are you prepared for the crash? I'm releasing a breakdown on why Japan is poorer than you think next. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Class dismissed.